Okay, cool. Next. Usually around this one, we notice that both of those are negative. So most people's first step is going to be to switch the 7 to the bottom, 8 to the top. But there's an easier way, because if you switch first, it actually ends up adding an additional step. So we're going to write a note down here at the very bottom. And it's going to say, if you have the same base, if you have the same base on top and bottom of a fraction, subtract first, you're going to subtract the exponents first, then switch if exponent is still negative. So you already know the rule from the day before that when you're dividing powers, you subtract the exponent. Now, in this case, it'll make it easier if you subtract first, and then once you're done subtracting, if that exponent is still negative, you switch it back. Now, when you subtract, and I will show you what I mean. When you subtract, essentially what it's doing is it's moving everything to the top, okay? When you subtract, it ends up moving the whole power to the top of the fraction. So let's look at example D. When you're dividing the same power, the powers or the base stays the same, so x remains x, and you subtract the exponents. Now, when we covered this topic on Friday, I told you to use that fraction bar or the division bar as my minus sign to remind you to subtract, okay? So we're going to subtract top minus bottom. My top number is -7 minus, but that 8 is also bringing in what symbol? A negative, minus -8. Now, all of this, whenever you're subtracting, brings everything to the top of the fraction. But when we have two negatives, it makes a positive. And what is -7 plus 8? +1. Once again, it's at the top of the fraction, so there's no need to keep it as a fraction, and there's no need to switch, because after I added those two, it became a positive exponent. Now, from here, a lot of people have been confused. They're saying, well, why did it turn into a positive? So -7, there it is. My minus sign is this first negative that I brought down. The 8 brought in its own negative symbol, and those two converted to a positive, but you're still subtracting your exponents. Look at example E. My power is which one? Or my base for this power is? The base is P. If you are dividing two powers with the same base, you subtract the exponent. The rule, the law for the exponent is to subtract them, to minus them, okay? So I'm going to take that -2 minus, and this time, does that 7 bring in its own negative? No, so it's only -2 minus 7. There is no double negative. The minus sign comes from that fraction bar. And what is -2 minus 7? -9. Now I said, once you get to the step where you're subtracting, it brings everything back to the top of the fraction. So now I have p to the power of -9 at the top of my fraction. Can I keep it this way? No, I grab that power and I move it where? To the bottom. Once you cross that line, you change the sign. So p to the power of 9 is at the bottom. I do need to fill in the top with what number? 1. And there's my answer, 1 over p to the power of 9. how many groups are we going to split this next example into? 3 groups. Let me move this. Over because I feel like it's going to be in the way. All right. We are going to split this into 3 groups. Now, you want to do this in alphabetical order. This is where it's very important to know whether things are whether your powers are on the top or the bottom of your fraction. So the first power we're going to work with is which one? Power with the base of D. And D to the power of -8, bless you, is currently on what side of the fraction? On the top. Now, do I need to do anything with this power? Yes, because we cannot have a negative exponent, I'm going to grab that power and move it down to the bottom. It started at the top, move it to the bottom. And that 8 becomes positive. I'm not going to fill in the top with a 1 or anything, not yet. Next letter in the alphabet is E. E cubed is currently at the top or the bottom of the fraction. So I'm going to write that down, E cubed. Do you think I need to do anything with E cubed? No, because it's already positive. I don't have another E up here to where I'm going to have to subtract. I can leave this one alone. Last group is for what? F. F to the power of 0 is on what side of my fraction? The top. Anything to the power of 0 gives me what? 1. Now, sometimes we cancel it out, sometimes we don't. We'll figure this one out at the end. So I'm going to come over here to the side. That way I can put everything together again. And I'm going to think top or bottom. I'm going to go from left to right. The first group is D. D goes where? On top or bottom? Bottom. So D to the power of 8. E, top or bottom? E cubed, or E to the power of 3. 1, top or bottom? Top. And we've put it back together again. It's always easier to split it apart before you put it back together again. It's easier to be looking at these columns or at these powers separately than to try to do it all in your head all together. Ready? All right. The last page, I believe, is up here. There it is. All right. Example A. How many groups are we going to have this time? 4. We're actually going to have 4. We have 3 different variables and a number. Let's start with that 7. Okay. 7 is currently on what side of the fraction? Top. Does it have any exponents on it? So do I need to move it? Nope. I'm going to leave it alone. The next, the first letter in the alphabet for here, for this next part, M. So we're going to go with the M's. M to the power of -3 is on what side of the fraction? On the top side. Can I leave that alone? No, you cannot have a negative exponent in your final answer. So I'm going to grab it from the top and move it to the bottom side of the fraction. So M cubed ends up at the bottom. Next is what? P or N? N. So I'm going to grab my N. N to the power of 6 is on what side of the fraction? Top. Do I need to do anything with N to the power of 6? No, nothing to do there. Last group is my P's. I have P to the power of -5 on what side of the fraction? Bottom. P to the power of -5. Can I leave it there? No, you cannot have a negative exponent. So I'm going to grab that negative exponent and move it to the top. P to, oh, my bad. I put it on the bottom. Making P to the power of +5 at the top of the fraction. I grabbed it from the bottom, moved it up. Now I'm ready to put everything together again. Does everybody have space under it? Okay, because I've been putting some beside the answer. All right, going from left to right. 7, top or bottom? M, top or bottom? N, top or bottom? P, top or bottom? P to the power of 5. Done. Questions? Okay. Look at example B. Does that look familiar? Yeah, it's the same exact example that we did at the very end on the other page. So we're going to move on. C. C is one of the toughies. So here we go. How many groups? 2 groups. We got 2 groups going on here. So I'm going to make a group for my A's, a group for my B's. This is a fraction. Now make sure every power in parentheses has its own exponent and circle any exponent that may be on the outside of those parentheses. All right. Top part of my fraction has which power? A cubed in parentheses with what exponent outside? At the bottom, we have a squared with what exponent outside? Okay. And usually we create an additional step where we write a to the power of 3 times 2, but one base with 2 exponents means you multiply them. Okay. One base and 2 exponents, you multiply them. And so I'm going to go ahead and skip that step. You should know by now that you're multiplying 2 times 3, and 2 times 3 gives me, so a to the 6 at the top, and negative 2 times 2, negative 4. Now you're only allowed to have one power with that base in the final answer. So how do I combine these? What do I do to the exponent? Subtract. But when I subtract, it moves everything to the top. So I got the 6 minus what? A negative 4. The 4 is bringing in its own negative, making this a positive, making this 6 plus 4 instead of 6 minus 4. And we end up with what? A to the power of 10. Once again, at the top. Now we need a group for the B's. The power at the top is B to the power of 4 inside of the parentheses with what outside? 2. Power at the bottom is B to the power of 1 with what outside? Negative 2. The first step is to do what to the exponents? Multiply. Okay, 4 times 2 gives us 8, and 1 times negative 2 gives us, okay? Now to combine these B's and create just one power, what do you want to do with the exponents? Subtract them. So it's B to the power of 8 minus what? Negative 2. So in this case, it turns to a positive. It will not always turn into a positive. That's why I'm still emphasizing that we're subtracting and not adding. And 8 plus 2 is what? 10. Now notice A and B both ended up at the top, so it's no longer necessary to keep it as a fraction. And on my own personal notes, I ended up running out of room, so I'm going to put the answer over here. A to the power of 10 times B to the power of 10. Questions? All right. D should be the easiest one out of all of them. Why? Okay, what did we learn in the video about the 0? If it's where? If it's located where? On the outside of the exponent, I mean on the outside of the parentheses, it changes everything inside to a 1. But this is also covered in the video for those of you that decided not to watch it. If you had something on the outside of the parentheses, like that 4, that 0 would not apply to the 4. I would bring that 4 down and multiply it by 1 to get me 4, okay? But I'll let you watch and actually do something that you're supposed to do. E. This is the longest one, I think. All right, here we go. Make sure every base has an exponent. So 6 is missing an exponent of 1. And circle any exponent that may be on the outside. And we're going to split it into how many groups? 3. 6 to the power of 1 is inside of the parentheses at the what of my fraction? Top. 1 base with 2 exponents on it means we have to multiply. And 1 times 2 is 2, still at the top of the fraction. And because my base and my exponent are numbers, we can continue. 6 squared is 36, top. Next group is for my x's. My top x power is x to the power of with what on the outside? My bottom power is x what? With what on the outside? Okay. This one's the one that has the most steps, so get ready. First, we do what with the exponents? Okay. So we get at the top, -3 times 2 is? And at the bottom, 2 times -2? Okay. So to combine these to create 1 power, what do? Subtract. So I'm going to take that top, -6, minus the bottom, which is -4. 2 negatives make a, not always going to make a positive. Just practicing it a lot. And -6 plus 4 gives me, can I stop there? No, because now I have to grab that power and move it where? To the bottom. So x squared goes to the bottom. It goes from a -2 at the top to a +2 at the bottom. Last group is for my, and that is at the top or the bottom of my fraction. So we have y squared at the top with what on the outside? 2. What do you do with the exponents? You. Okay. And 2 times 2 gives me, do I need to move that y to the 4th to the bottom? No, it's positive. I'm ready to put my answer back together again, which I'm also going to do beside this because I don't know if y'all ran out of room or not. All right, left to right, 36, top or bottom? Top. X squared, top or bottom? Y to the 4th, top or bottom? There's my final answer. Split it apart, put it back together again. So much easier to work with 1 letter at a time or 1 base at a time. Questions? Last one, very, very last one. Okay, here we go. Make sure everything in the parentheses has a what? Exponent. Which ones are missing exponents? 4 and 8. So put a 1 and 1. Also make sure or double check to see if what has an exponent? The outside of the parentheses. How many groups? 3. 3. All right, let's start with the numbers. Let's start with the powers that have a number as a base. The power at the top that has a number as a base is 4 to the power of 1 with what outside? And at the bottom, we have 8 to the power of 1 with what outside? 3. Now, yesterday you had an assignment, just look up, you had an assignment where the parentheses was only here, but not at the top. If you look at this one, you'll notice that the parentheses is connecting both the top and the bottom. So that 3 applies to the top and the bottom of the fraction. Everybody see the difference? Okay, so I'm going to grab that 3 and I'm going to do what with it? Multiply. And 1 times 3 gives me 3. So at the top, we end up with 4 cubed. At the bottom with 8 cubed. Both the base and the exponent are numbers. So can we continue? And what is 4 cubed? What is 8 cubed? What do you do with every fraction? Simplify if possible. Will it change? to what? 1/8. Ooh, that's a big one. 1/8. Questions on that one? All right, now we're moving on, alphabetical order, to D's. D to the power of 0 is inside the parentheses, but it has what exponent outside? And it's also at the bottom, so make sure you're writing it at the bottom of your fraction. And you multiply those exponents. 0 times 3 gives me 0. And anything to the power of 0 gives me 1. 1. Now, can we cancel this one? Yes or no? Yes, the reason we're able to cancel it is because if there's something else that's going to end up at the bottom of my fraction, which is in this case that 8, not the 5/12, the 8, then 1 times 8 is still 8. I'm not going to need it. It's not going to affect my final answer. Last group we have is my x's. X to the power of -5 is on what side? On the top. That is in parentheses with what exponent outside? 3. What do you do with the exponents first? Okay, so -5 times 3 is? Can I keep my answer this way? We have to grab that power and move it where? To the bottom. And then we'll have x to the power of 15 positive at the bottom of the fraction. So here we go, putting everything back together again. I'm gonna draw my fraction bar. 1/8 is already in the form of a fraction, so there's no confusion on what goes on top and bottom. 1 at the top, 8 at the bottom. We already canceled out that 1 in the middle, and x goes where? So x to the power of 15. Questions on this one? All right.